Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing story coming to us from the Great White North from Canada. We have Sean on board today. Sean is a 38-year-old Canadian, and on June 11th, 2020, he died. Sean had an NDE where he was brought to a library and given a choice to either stay or go back, but first was given a message that it was his last chance. That day was his flip moment and only the beginning. Sean's life was never the same after that. And afterwards, he started having anomalous experiences such as UFOs and also unlocking a repressed memory of his first abduction experiences as a 4-year-old boy. He has been exploring shamanism, hermeticism, Buddhism, Jungian psychology, pretty much all the isms, and he now hosts his own podcast where he details his own experiences. Sean's belief is that it's important to share our stories in order to destigmatize the subject and also demonstrate that no matter what demographic, experiences with the anomalous do happen, and they need to be explored together. So, Sean, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about all this stuff with fellow experiencers. So it's fun.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. Now, you're a generational contactee/abductee. So, could you get into some of your family stories, let's say, before we get into yours?
Yeah, no problem. So when I was growing up, there was a story that I wasn't quite sure if I believed or anything, just like a lot of people, that we had since I was little. So back in, and I didn't really actually know the full extent of the family history of it until after I started having my own experiences, and then I started delving into more things. And then I even got my grandpa's journal where he went through all of his different experiences. So my grandpa ended up having, he was born, I forget, I think 1920 something. And his first experience was in 1939. He saw a red orb flying over his school, and he had this feeling that he came out and he was supposed to stay behind while everyone went home. And he looked up into the sky, and there's this giant, well, not giant, but large red orb, like a plasma, and that kind of had black specks kind of going through it in the sky. He didn't know what to make of it, of course. And then going throughout his years, he ended up having more and more experiences, and kind of like we were talking just before this about how it kind of seems that you have like this die down period during adolescence. So like for him, it died down again around when he was probably like 10 to 14-ish, somewhere around there. And then he didn't start having them again until his adult years. And it was the same for me. I remember some of my experiences, which I'll talk about later, but yeah, it was kind of interesting how it seems to have a die down period and then it starts picking back up. I don't know if that's across the board for everybody, but I always found it interesting. So then in 1967, my mom and her 67 or 69, I can't remember. My mom and her siblings were going to go, they're bored on the farm. This is in rural Manitoba. Kind of, if anyone knows, it's by Clear Lake in southern Manitoba. And it turns out it's like a hot spot for UFOs, of course. And they decided it was a foggy morning. They really wanted to go play their favorite game, which was Shadows in the Fog. So they each had like their toy. My mom had her bike, and then my one aunt had like a pull behind horse, and my uncle had like a tractor and that sort of thing, right? And they're all playing. They're going through down the gravel road towards the back quarter of the field, where the old house used to be, and they're playing like trying to scare each other with like what kind of shadows you see in the fog, right? So they're all like, I see a bear, or I see a horse, or I see a ghost, and they're all kind of trying to like one up each other as they're playing in the fog. And they get to this one spot along the oat field, and my mom and her siblings saw this giant. They thought it was the granary tower. So I don't know if you don't know what a granary tower is. Those on the prairies we have these giant towers that they use for all the grain. So they're about like 200 feet tall. And they saw this giant, what they described as like a cowboy hat, standing in the fog, and they thought it was the granary tower, but they quickly realized like it's not where the granary tower is. It's on the other side of the farm. It's not supposed to be there. And it looked like a cowboy hat, and they're kind of staring at it. And they weren't that far away. They're probably like 100 feet or so. And it's just like this huge shadow. And all of a sudden, at the bottom of this shadow, this doorway appears of white light, and this how my mom describes it is like this tortoiseshell ship. So it looks like a tortoiseshell silver ship comes out, and it's about the size of like a Volkswagen or something, and it goes down into the ditch, and then it kind of hovers around. It's only hovering like a foot off the ground, and then this another doorway appears, and these three or four little creatures get out, and they didn't know what aliens were at the time, because this is back in the 60s. They didn't have cable. I think if they did, it was only like they only had the one channel. They didn't have running water until my mom was like 15. So so they had like a well and stuff, and they had like an outhouse, like so like they didn't have that much exposure to any outside forces. And so these three fairies, they were in skin tight suits with helmets that are kind of teardrop shaped, and they kind of were dancing in the ditch, and they came up onto the road and they were dancing. And my mom and her siblings got this really strong feeling that they wanted to play. And as soon as they had this feeling that they wanted to play, my mom's youngest sister, who was only like 4 or 5 at the time, took a step forward. And then the next thing they remember, they didn't realize they had blacked out until we started talking about this again. Just like only this year, that they must have been missing time. Because the next thing they remember is my mom's just booking it down the road, screaming for their lives, and they go running towards the house. And grandpa and my grandma and my granny are outside, and they go running up to my grandpa, and they each grab, like, one grabs a leg, one grabs another leg, one grabs 2 arms, like they're just freaked right out. And so grandpa asked them to show him what they were talking about, and so he took them up to where they were in the oat field, and in the whatever was there was gone. But in the oat field, my mom remembers 3. My grandpa, in the journal, now that I've done it, I've read it. He remembers one crop circle. So I guess it depends on the memory. And it was so long ago, and they never really wrote it down, other than my grandpa. And it was a giant crop circle in the middle of the oat field, just like perfectly laid down, a little bit of scorch marks, that sort of thing. And so grandpa got up. They looked at that, and while they were out there, Granny and Grandma were standing on the porch, and it was still foggy, and they heard this really low humming, swirling sound that came flying over top of the house. They didn't see anything, but they could hear it like flying over top, really low and slow. So then they came back, and Grandpa put all the 4 kids into different rooms, and got them to write or draw, sorry, with crayons what they saw. And they all pretty much drew the same thing. And then he took them and threw them in the fire. And then pretty much no, they all got told not to talk about it. My one aunt still tried to tell everyone. They were really excited about it, right? So of course you tried to tell everybody at school, and they got ostracized like crazy. So they quickly learned, like, don't say this shit to anybody else, because no one's gonna believe you, and they're just gonna make fun of you. So this stayed in the family for years and years, and it's the story I grew up with. So every summer I'd go back to Manitoba, and I'd try to quiz them, see if it changes over the years. So I'd ask my grandpa, and I try to get them alone all the time. So like that would be like my main goal while I was there. There was always weird things that happened on that farm. It was a weird place. But But it was like a good place. It was really fun to be there. We built forts and everything. But yeah, so that was like one of my um kind of like the familial kind of thing. My mom doesn't hadn't really had any other experiences until like very recently. With her, she had a near death experience where she saw like a gray standing in her hospital. Uh, that other than that, she never really had any other experiences. My other family members have had some experiences as well, but yeah, that's kind of like the generational kind of thing. My grandpa had experiences and up until his death, and he ended up having 13 different types of cancers throughout his life. So he had a lot of interesting experiences. He had this. He would know they were going to be there. It was almost like a preemptive by the smell. And I've had the same smell. I don't have it anymore, which is I find interesting. I'm not quite sure why that is. But it smells kind of like superheated wires and welding and ozone all at the same time. I don't know if you ever have smelt that, but it's the same. Me and him had that smell, and I was the only one that's ever smelt it. And he would know that they were going to show up when that smell is around. So yeah, it was. He had tons of uh, marks on him all the time. So he'd constantly have like these red marks, perfectly round, and he'd know they were there. He'd see shadow beings. Yeah, he had quite a few. I was given his journal, which was really nice after I had started having a lot of my experiences, and which helped me understand some of my own because it was kind of I know like when you first start like really delving into your own stuff, it's nice to see that you're like not the only one. Because you're going through I know for myself it felt like when I first started having all these things, it was like, am I going fucking crazy? Uh which I don't know if everybody thinks that, but I know I sure did. I sure really thought I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to go to the loony bin or something. But then you start it's way too consistent through other people's experiences that you're like, oh, there's obviously something here. Yeah.
So, at least, having these experiences within your family that really helped you cope with what happened to you, really.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It gave me a little bit of a basis. Um, like mom's experience for sure really helped. And like after I saw my first UFO, um, right after my NDE, it kind of like solidified everything. And then I started having some more experiences like later on.
Okay, so let's start off with your story. At what age did everything start off for you?
So I didn't really remember. I had like these vague recollections uh from when I was like a child. And I think I'm now looking back, I'm pretty sure I just repressed them. It's either I repressed them or it was repressed for me. So I have these vague recollections. One's super clear that unlocked after my NDE. And I guess I could talk about that. So when I was 4 years old, I remember waking up inside this green liquid, and I was like essentially drowning. It was super viscous, and it was really dark, and I struggled to get to the surface, and took a giant breath, and I was screaming and like for help and stuff because I didn't really know how to swim. I think I was in swimming lessons just at the beginning of this. And I was struggling, barely could get through this liquid, struggling to find an edge. And I found an edge, and I was ended up in what it was a giant rectangular, uh, essentially pool. It's hard to describe. And I climbed myself up, and it was like, like almost like sticking to you. It was kind of gross. It was almost like slime. And I was naked, completely naked, and there was all these little kids about my age, some older, some around my age, all different nationalities. They're all screaming, and I'm screaming too because I had no idea what's going on. They're screaming in this corner. I'm in this giant room that's completely like it doesn't seem to have very many lights. It seems to be illuminated, but not there's no obvious signs of light. And the walls are all smooth gray, but the kind of what it reminded me and still reminds me of is castle bricks of stone, but they were completely smooth, but they were kind of layered like that. So it looked like it was placed that sort of way. It kind of reminded me of like a dungeon of like in a fantasy novel or something, but it was like completely smooth. And it's in this really big room. I can't see the ceiling because it's shrouded in darkness. And I go running over to these other kids and I'm asking them like, do you know where we are? Or like asking for my mom and dad, like this sort of stuff, like what a 4-year-old would be screaming about. Like I'm terrified at this point. And they don't speak English. I don't think anybody in there spoke English other than me. And there was about 8 or 9 of us. There might have been more. It's hard to remember. And we were all screaming. I grabbed onto this little blonde girl that was probably a couple years older than me. She was probably like six-ish. And she grabbed onto me, and I was just like clinging to her as hard as I could, completely terrified. And then at the far end of the room, a doorway appeared. So it's kind of like the one with my mom. And also another experience I've had where it's just a doorway, just all of a sudden, it's like it materializes and it's just filled with white light. And this lady walks out, blonde. Uh, Hard to tell if she was tall. It's really hard to tell because, like, from my vantage point, everybody looks tall, and the she's completely naked, or she's in a skin tight leotard or suit that doesn't have any seams. I'm not sure. But she doesn't have any outward signs of like there's like no nipples or genitalia or anything. So it might have been a suit that just couldn't see the seam or something. Super like super beautiful, but there's something weird about her eyes because they're larger than normal, and they're like about I don't know if you can like about this big, but they're like almost bioluminescent blue, like they're super blue, and I get this like warmth feeling from her. We're all just we were so shocked that all of us stopped screaming, and she starts walking towards us in through this room, past the pool and over to us, and we start screaming again. Like I'm yelling for, do you know where my mom is? Like I need help. Like where's my dad? Like what's going on? Like why am I here? And she grabs a boy by the hand, and he goes completely like slack, like emotionless, like nothing's touching his face, like anything, right? And the weird thing about her too is that you're getting a sense from her that like it's okay, like she's safe, like all this stuff, but there's like no emotion on her face. So it's almost like there's nothing there, but you can feel it off of her too. It was really weird. So this boy, she leads this boy who's now completely obedient, and now all of us are starting to scream because now like what the hell's going on? She leads him out of the room. The doorway disappears. We're left there, and she keeps coming back. One every who knows what time. I don't know what the timing was. It felt like forever, but could have been a couple minutes in between. Um, she keeps coming back and grabbing another kid one by one until it's my turn. And I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna bite her. I'm gonna do something because I don't know what this is and I don't like it, but I'll bite her. And she reaches her hand out, and all of a sudden I don't feel everything's gonna be fine. It's like totally okay. This is normal. This has happened before. It'll happen again. Don't worry about it. Like, and I feel totally fine now. Like it's like this is like a normal procedure. I grab her hand and she leads me out of this room. There's probably only like 1 or 2 kids left at this point. It leads me out of the room. I'm in this white hallway that's completely smooth. There's no hard edges. It's almost like if you took like it's kind of like tapered, so kind of like that. And there's no lights, no visible seams, but it like the walls and the floor and the ceiling, they're all illuminated. So it's like the walls themselves and the floor and the ceiling are all giving off this the light itself, but there's no shadows. And I really want to touch I remember feeling like I really wanted to touch it, but I couldn't. I could just move my eyes. That was it. And it was like I was on a track. And so I was getting moved along. We went through this long hallway, and then all of a sudden we were in this room that was like a mushroom cap. And there was this on the one edge, it was like a view screen or a window, something. And I could see white, like it's either stars or it's underwater. I'm not 100% sure. For the longest time, I always thought it was stars. Right now, I'm kind of flip-flopping with, I don't know if it could be underwater too. Because sometimes where you can see like bubbles and stuff, it could have been that too. So it's really hard to tell. And then in the center was this single table, just white. It looks plastic, like, but it looked completely like it's weird because this whole room, there again, no hard edges, and this table kind of like grew out of the floor on a single stem almost, and then was on like a perfectly white table. She led me over, and I laid down on it, completely normal. And I don't remember her saying bye or anything. She was gone. And I was just staring at my toes, and I could feel a presence behind me. And then right after that, I was trying to look, and again, I couldn't move again. All I could do is like, I tried to move my neck a little bit and then look up as hard as I could. And then all I saw was these big black almond shaped eyes, like like a classic, but they were wet. I remember them looking really wet. Uh, and like this big forehead. And then that's all I could see. And then that's all I remember.
Wow. Wow. Did you, before waking up or consciously realizing you're in this liquid vat of goo, let's say, were you in your bed?
No idea.
So did this happen during the night?
I think so. It's hard to remember. It's weird. I think because it's hard to remember the events before and after this because it was so long ago, and that it didn't really get unlocked, which is still really weird, unlocked until after my NDE and my first UFO. And then it kind of presented itself as like uh, a recurring um, dream slash nightmare slash memory. It's a really weird way to remember it. So it's hard to it's almost like it's like kind of like on the edges of like, I can't remember if it was like if I went to sleep and I just woke up there. I can't remember the events before and after. I just remember this one memory. And it feels like different than because I've had lucid dreams, I've had mushroom experience. It feels different than all those. It feels like a memory. So I choose to decide. I've chosen to accept it as a memory rather than something else.
Okay. Now, did you breathe in the fluid?
Mm-mm. No, no. I remember waking up, and it was just, or not waking up, or I was in the liquid. The first thing I remember is being in the liquid and struggling, and then getting up. I only had to float up probably or swim up this much, and then I was out of it, and I could breathe in. And the air, the funny thing about the air, I guess, was that it wasn't hot or cold. It was like perfect. There was no wind or anything. And like that slime stuff that was on me while I was in there, like dried off. And even though I was naked, I wasn't cold, but I wasn't hot either. So yeah.
I'm wondering if that was a sort of disinfectant, or I've had people on that they were put in vats while on a UFO, and that liquid protected their body from space travel. So like a
Oh,
suit, let's
interesting.
say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was did they ever tell you what color?
I
Green
have
seems
to,
to be significant for me for some reason. I don't know why.
I can't recall, but
Oh,
that's
interesting.
one of the main purposes really was for space travel, for humans at least.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
Uh,
I don't remember a lot of my stuff. Like I don't have any clear instructions from them or anything like that. I'm not like some of the other experiences where they seem to remember everything. Yeah, I don't have that. I only have like snippets of things.
Yeah, some get shown symbols or they're
Hmm.
educated to, use the ship, pilot
Yeah,
the
I
ship.
have this vague sense that I'm good at flying things. I've never been a
Uh,
pilot though. I am a crane operator, but and a paramedic, but yeah, not the there. I have this weird sense that I can fly things, but I've never flown anything.
I've got this vague recall, or I don't know, feeling that when I'm in a tunnel or like a corridor, that normally I would glide
Oh,
through the tunnel.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so like it's I'm at school or I'm in a small tunnel. I'm not supposed to walk it. I'm supposed to glide, which is
Oh, interesting.
are freaky. But yeah, you said something that really was freaky. That you came to and you were looking at your feet.
Hmm.
You remember what I told you prior to the show during when I had the black hole and the shadow people. I
That's
came to.
right.
I was looking at my feet. They were barefoot, and I was wearing hospital robes. So like that. Oh, memories just came back to me. That's freaked me out.
Oh, interesting. Well, sorry.
Yeah, because for a long time I put it off as okay, maybe a vision of me like having because I eventually had open heart surgery. So
Yep.
I was putting that off as could be related to that. But anyhow, so what happened after that? Did you tell your mom the story?
Yeah,
And
well, they remember me talking about it when I was a kid. So after my NDE and seeing the first UFO, I'd been talking to my parents quite a bit about this. Been talking to my wife at the time about it. She didn't really know what to do with it, even though she was present for the UFO that my daughter and I saw. But she couldn't look at it, which was it was still really interesting because she was physically unable to look at that UFO because we were out camping and there was we were driving down back towards camp and there was my daughter saw it first and she saw quite a few things for like a period of time and there was this it's not a tic tac, it's like a football and it was completely white, smooth, and there seemed to be like a force field over it. Interestingly enough, my memory is really it was moving really slow, but my daughter and I had recorded it like the experience like almost right afterwards. Um, and when I listened to that again, it was moving super fast, but my memory is like it's like moving super slow. Like you could almost tell it was looking at us. And so it went past our windshield and it kind of like as soon as it saw that we had like both seen it, and my other daughter wouldn't look up either. It went zipping past when and I'm trying to find a spot turn pull over. And this zipped into towards these clouds and it dropped like 1,000 feet. It was probably like 3,000 feet up, and it dropped like 1,000 feet. And then I pulled over, and I was telling my daughter at the time, I was like, grab the binoculars while I'm trying to grab my cell phone while I'm trying to find a spot to pull over. Interestingly enough, there was no one on the road. I should have just stopped her in the middle of the damn road, but never think about it at the time, right? Um, and so she catches it in the binoculars, and she sees it make a 90-degree turn right into a cloud. And I pull over, I grab, and as like at the same time she saw it zip into the cloud, I had grabbed my phone and put it onto camera mode, and I was going like this, and it went into the clouds. And then we waited there for a while, hoping it would come out, and it either never went there, or it went somewhere else, or did something else. So I had been talking to my parents about that, and then my memory unlocked. And so we started talking about that, about my memory. And I was getting pretty obsessed with UFOs at this point because I hadn't really been paying attention to anything about UFOs or UAPs for years. Like it was kind of like I check in every couple of years, kind of go, it's still the same shit. Nothing, disclosure still just around the corner. I don't care. Um, and nothing really had changed. They had that couple of things from the New York Times or whatever one with Lou Elizondo and stuff. And yeah, okay, it's kind of neat. And so I wasn't really paying attention. But then after that, I got really into it. And so every time we'd get together, we'd be talking about UFOs. talking about all the new stuff. And then in November of 2020, and this was right, I was still pretty injured from my accident, and we went hunting, my dad and I. And we had gone hunting. We were sleeping in a tent. It was November. It was I think it was minus 30. We were sleeping in the tent, which was pretty comfortable. We had like one of those heaters in there, so it was actually really nice. And that night, my one buddy Wayne, he usually has to get up 3 times a night for the last he was I think he was 70 at the time or 67 or something. He used to have to get up every night 3 times a night to go pee, like religiously, no matter what. And we'd had a couple wobbly pops, and we had gone to bed late, and we are going to get up early to go hunting. And I heard this whooping sound, and we'd heard this as a group in Rocky Mountain House, the same spot where I'd seen the UFO, interestingly enough. That like literally the exact same spot, and this whooping sound, and it's like whoop, and it sounds like a giant howler monkey. And we thought at the time, like the hunting group, and there was 7 of us. We thought at the time it was one of the guys, like just like messing around. But we were all sitting there by the fire, and we were all looking around and going, oh, like, okay, well, it's not us. And so, cause we were making fun of it, cause we're yelling back, woo. And then start getting mad and started like, you could hear it grab whatever it was. You could hear it grab trees and like smacking against other trees, and these giant rocks, it sounded like getting thrown. It's in the middle of the night too. And we're in the middle of Crown Land. So there's like no one around us. And Wayne, he started laughing. He's like, it's just a Sasquatch. Like, don't worry about it. And he's Métis, so he'd been hunting since he was like he could barely walk, kind of thing. And so that was that one experience. So then in November of 2020, I woke up to this whooping again, and this time was different. Like I didn't get any weird feelings or anything from that other one. Like before my NDE, I didn't have like like any visions or anything like that, or feeling people. But now, like at post NDE, now I can really feel people now, and I can feel like energy from things. It took a long time to figure out. I still haven't figured it out completely, but yeah. So I hear this whooping sound, and I'm thinking, oh, and I felt this like they're pissed off kind of feeling, and there's multiple of them. And I wake up, and like now I'm fully awake. I'm like, oh God. And I'm yelling at my dad. And I'm like, Dad, wake up. Like there's something out there. And I don't have my contacts on or in. So I'm going to get him to grab the rifle, because I'm going to have to go find my glasses because I can't find them. And he won't wake up. So I'm like going to sit up. And then all of a sudden I hear this swooshing sound. And it's the same. If you could picture a swirling whirlpool of water, but instead of water, it's air, that's what it sounds like. It's like the best word I can come up with is swooshing. And then when I hadn't, that's how I described it. And then later on in my grandpa's journal, he actually describes it the same as a swooshing sound. So it's a weird noise, and I can hear it coming from the north. And all of a sudden, all this whooping stops, and this thing comes flying in, and you can hear it coming, and it lands over top of the tent, and I can see looking straight up and going, holy shit, what the hell is this? And you can hear this swooshing sound like right overhead. And then I just have like cut to black essentially. And then I just remember snippets of me walking through the snow just in my boxers. And it's minus 30. And I'm walking through the snow, and there's this giant clearing where we go hunting. And we go hunting there every year, and I haven't had a weird experience since then. Seen lots of bears and stuff, but that's normal. But I remember walking to the silver craft, essentially kind of like it's either a disc or a football. It's kind of hard to see. and it's hovering just a foot off the ground, and there's a silver ramp, no seams or anything coming down, and there's two little grays there. And I remember at the time I called them the little fuckers. Now I I didn't like them at the time. Now I don't have any negative feelings for those ones for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. And they were waiting for me, and I remember walking up to them, and then that's the last thing I remember. So I was telling my parents about these different experiences as they were happening. And they remembered that I'd gone missing once. I'd been gone I was missing for like a couple hours when I was little. And they remember talking about me talking to them about these weird uh, nightmares and dreams or whatever. They didn't know what to make of them at the time because I would tell them, and I didn't remember telling them, but apparently I told them when I was little. And I had went missing. And I grew up in Fort McMurray, so way up north. And I'd gone out with my friends, and my mom and dad told me to get back by noon. And my one friend had to watch, and he's like, "Oh, it's noon," and the sun was like midday. And then the next thing I remember is, so I left. Next thing I remember is I'm sitting in front of the TV or standing. No, I'm standing in front of the TV, and the TV's off. So I turned it on, and Batman was on or something, like the 1960s Batman. So I sat down and started watching it, and then mom and dad come home, and dad just pissed. Like, where were you? Like, and it was late. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So those two could be related. I'm not sure. I don't think I was out there when I was 4, so I don't think that was the exact same. But yeah, they said I got grounded and everything, and they tried quizzing, like, where were you? And I said I left at like when you told me to, and so I was end up grounded for that.
That's funny. Did Was the ND the thing that really helped you remember everything? Did you forget everything up to that moment?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I'd repressed so much. Like before my NDE, I didn't. You could almost classify as like a sociopath because I had locked down my emotions so much. So I don't know if you've ever done your Myers-Briggs uh, personality types. It's Carl Jung was the one that kind of classified people into 16 different types. And so I had done mine. So before the NDE, just a couple of months prior, interestingly enough, I was an ENTP. So it's just like all logic, kind of like the Joker, like an anarchist, that was like my personality type, right? And then after my NDE, I just recently did it just to double check, and I've now changed into like an ENFP. So now instead of just logic, I'm feeling things now. And that was kind of the differences. Like before my NDE didn't have any feeling. I tried to only have a couple feelings uh like anger and um lust, and that's pretty much it. That wasn't that deep, to be completely honest. And then afterwards I started having I didn't realize at the time, but then I started feeling other people. So, and I thought I was going, like, I would get mad all of a sudden, like super randomly, and I couldn't figure it out because I was starting to like really delve into my my own psyche at this point, because I started doing lots of shadow work to try to help explain some of these things that I was getting. Like I was exploring psychedelics, I was exploring shamanism and hermeticism and everything, and I thought I was going a little nuts. So I was trying to think of anything that could like classify what the hell I was experiencing. A lot of the experiencers that I'd listened to, they talked a little bit about it, but they didn't really delve super deep into it. And so then I remember this one time I was sitting in my crane, and I was operating, and all of a sudden I got this wave of just super mad. Like I wanted to kick things, and there was nothing to explain it. So like this was like a perfect example of something that I could really look at. And it was like this wave of anger. I wanted to throw things, wanted to kick things. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, what the hell? Like, why am I so mad all of a sudden? Like, nothing's literally happened. I'm literally holding something off the hook of my crane. Literally nothing's happened. I'm listening to music. Like, actually, today's been pretty good. Most of my days were kind of shit then. Today was pretty good. And I look over and there's one of my coworkers and he was easily, and we were stuck together on the weekend shift all the time. So we're always with each other. And I look over and he must have dropped something on his foot or something. And he was so mad. He was kicking things, he was throwing things. And then it finally clicked. I was like, okay, maybe it's not just me I'm feeling. Maybe I'm feeling like other people around me. And so that sort of like allowed me some distance from myself in order to kind of be able to figure out what the hell was going on. So now, like, now it's pretty interesting that like I can feel people walking into a room and know what they're feeling pretty much and stuff. It's almost like a sixth sense now. And then before it was overwhelming. Now I've kind of learned how to be able to like lock it down, so I don't have to. It was super overwhelming. So now it's kind of like, oh, it's pretty good. Like if I want to, I can, and if uh, I don't need to all the time to feel everybody because it's like exhausting. Hmm.
Were you at the hospital when the NDE happened?
No, no. If you want, I can talk about that.
Yep, please.
Sure. So, so in June 20th, or sorry, June 11th, 2020, I was at the worst point in my life. Well, not the worst. It kept sliding downhill for a while. Uh, shit kept flying downhill. But I had just lost my business. We were getting sued all over the place. It was a super bad time. We were losing the place we were living in. We had to go live in our two-bedroom condo, and that place had a sinkhole, so I had to fix that before we could move in. It was so we were going to move into my parents' basement for like the couple months while I fixed everything up. Um, just like we were doing it like on a shoestring budget. My mom and dad were helping us trying to get this so we could get it done and move in there. So we're going from a big, huge house down to a two-bedroom apartment, two kids and my wife. And I was super tired because I'd been working full time, and then I would go home, pack, and then I'd go to the condo and start working on trying to get it ready to live in. So I was doing insane hours. And it was the last day before we had to move. We had like a couple days, but we wanted to be out by like the tomorrow. And all I had to do was do a couple of touch-ups of paint. That's it. Uh, my wife at the time was cleaning. Like we were pretty much ready. And so I was super tired. I went downstairs into the basement, and there was this 5-gallon pail of so it's like this big of paint. And on the top, there's this pull top. And I'm trying to refund it so I can pour out the paint, but the damn thing won't come off. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I should really go upstairs and get my screwdriver. And then I was thinking, nah, screw it. I'm too tired. I don't want to go back up there. I'll just use my pocket knife. So I always have a pocket knife. I'll show you it's not this exact one, but it's pretty close. So it's like, it's about this big. And so I use it and I'm trying to pry it open. I have my hand down on the bucket, straight out, my arm straight out, and I'm trying to pry it open, and all of a sudden it pops. Well, it popped all right and went straight into my arm. And I ended up going right here. This is actually from the surgeon. They had to cut open my arm to fix everything. But yeah, I ended up going in here and it went almost all the way through. Nicked my one of my arteries in my forearm. So there's two that run down here, two main ones, and I nicked one. The problem with nicking it is it doesn't self-seal. So normally, if you sever an artery, it will naturally constrict, and it's pretty easy to control. Somehow, I just nicked it, and so I slammed. The knife popped out super easy. The funny thing is about getting stabbed, it didn't hurt at all, which was really surprising to me. Like you would expect like it to hurt, didn't hurt at all. And it was just more surprising. And the blood started squirting everywhere. And I clamped down on it and I went running upstairs. Didn't get a lick of blood on the main floor, thank goodness, just in the basement. And I ran out the door. As I'm running, I'm yelling to my wife, like, we got to go to the hospital. Like, I did a whoopsie. And I'm running to the car, which is across the street on the across the garage pad. I'm running in. I hear her behind me. She's like, "There's no way I'm driving you." And I look behind me, and it looked like an elk got shot. And I'm a paramedic as well, and I don't think I've ever seen that much. It was like pouring out of me, and I wouldn't stop. So I was like, okay, well, we better call 911. And I went back to my truck and I threw down the tailgate, and it started filling up the tailgate. And I was like, holy shit, like this is not stopping. Um, and she's on with 911. I was like, oh, I should probably I'm gonna have to put on a tourniquet. 911 for some reason, and it's kind of like those things where you look back and you're like, there's some weird things that kind of happened in your life to make sure some things happened. That's how I view this one. And they told me not to do a tourniquet, which is super. Like, I'm doing direct pressure, it's not working. Like, I'm elevated, nothing's working, and it's pouring out of me. And I was pushing so hard, I ended up snapping my muscles in my forearm. So half of them went up into my shoulder, the other half went into my wrist. And I'm holding down and I'm starting to get woozy. So they said they're only a couple of minutes away. I lean back up, I sit down and I lean up against the garage door, and everything's starting to get woozy. My vision's starting to have all getting like white from the edges and slowly starting to come in. And I remember like hearing my wife and the neighbor talking, and I slump over and I get her to bring over the kid's wagon, and I put myself in the recovery position. And at this time, she had given me a rag, and it pretty much stopped, it gone down to a drip. Um, and I remember feeling like I could feel everything, like all my senses were like super heightened. So I could smell everything like super strong. I could smell the copper and the iron, like that irony taste in the blood, and I could smell um the concrete and the grass, that sort of thing. The sun felt like super hot on my skin, and then everything kind of like faded away, and it was like down to like there's only this much vision left, so the rest was white. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking down on a dude from like 20 feet up, and he looks like shit, and there's blood everywhere. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, that guy don't look good. He looks terrible. And it took me a couple seconds to realize it was me. And then as soon as I realized it was me, I got rocketed straight up, um, past those clouds, past the earth, past everything. And I was in this black space, and there's this white light. And it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was how I describe it is like if you took a white ink and you dropped it on a piece of black paper, that's kind of what it looks like. Interestingly enough, my logo that I try to do for my podcast is kind of like the same. It's that sort of like raggedy, like edges. It wasn't smooth or anything. And I start going, either I'm going closer to it or it's coming towards me. I'm not quite sure. Uh, I'm getting drawn to it, I'll say, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I could feel other things around me, like they're going towards it too, or it's coming towards them. But I don't see anything else. I just feel other things around me. And then as soon as it's like really close and it's kind of like taking up my entire vision, I'm in this meadow. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, this is super stereotypical, right? Like, I'm in the afterlife, and this is it's exactly what I was expecting. Like, but it was like super nice, beautiful grass. Uh, there's butterflies, and like I was into nature, but like I was like really loving the butterflies and the flowers and everything, like really loving it there. And it had this weird, almost like a bubble effect for my vision. It was it was like looking through a bubble. I don't know how else to describe it. But it's super beautiful. There was this one babbling brook and this one tree. just standing in the middle there, off in the distance. And then this harp music started playing, and I remember thinking, I was like, "Holy, this is like super, super like on the nose, like if this is the afterlife, like it's like they're going through my check marks, like yeah, okay, yeah, next." And but this music was super beautiful. I never heard it again. I wish I was a musician. I don't know if I would be able to replicate it. It was like some of the it was music, but there was like many layers of music almost, I would say. Uh, and then all of a sudden I felt this presence around me, and they were talking to me in a not auditory, but like in my mind, in a different language that I didn't recognize, but I understood them at the same time, even though they were speaking to me. It was at the same time I was like getting a direct translation, almost like the subtitles. So you're seeing somebody like I just finished watching Shogun, and they're speaking Japanese, but you're reading the subtitles at the same time. It's kind of like that. And um, and they're telling me that I have a choice, that I can stay with them or I can go back. And I had already just, I was like, well, there's no fucking way I'm going back to that shit show. It was terrible. I didn't think I was a good father. I thought it was more of a burden than anything. I thought that my wife and my kids would be better off without me, to be honest. Um, and so in my mind, I'd already decided. I was like, well, there's no way I'm going back. And they said, well, before you decide, we want to show you something. So then they brought me into this library. Probably is now is probably what everyone describes as the Akashic Library. I'm not sure. But all I remember is this giant library. If you ever been to St. Peter's Basilica and like the Vatican, it's like that immense but bigger. And like this giant hallway with books lining from floor to ceiling on multiple levels. And these books are uh, really big. Actually, they're kind of like the size. I just got this book. So I just got this book, and it's about this size. Uh, they're all like that, except they're leather bound. Um, and you could smell like the leather, and there was torchlight, but there was no smoke. It was like uh, a perfect library, I would say. And the wood floors and on the ceilings, there was paintings. I can't remember what they looked like. And then I kind of got led. I don't remember walking or anything. It's kind of like what you described. Like you feel like you're just floating. Like that's what it felt like. And I was just getting led around, and I got led into this other room off the side. And in this room was this single table. Again, it's like these commonalities. The more I talk about this, the more I can notice like there's themes, like the single legged table, just like the one in the white room, or the one I just told you about. And on this table was a dome. And on this dome, they showed it to me. So I can see it, but I can't see it, if that makes sense. So I have this feeling of remembering it and seeing it, but I don't actually, it's not like I don't have access to it, kind of thing. So what I saw was these tree roots, which was all my different choices that I could have made throughout my life, which led to a tree trunk. And that tree trunk was this moment, my NDE essentially. So it was an unavoidable moment. In Spider-Man, the brand new cartoon one, the Across the Universe, or whatever, they talk about these canon events, and it's like the spider web of these, and there's specific moments Spider-Man has to have in order to affect the change through for his journey that he's going on. And that's how I kind of interpreted like this tree trunk. So this tree trunk is that moment where it doesn't matter what choices you make. There's a ton of different ways you can make your choices. I could have had a much easier life by making different choices throughout my entire life, but it was always going to lead to that moment. And then that tree trunk goes into these tree branches, and there's all these other choices I can make. And then those turn into tree roots, and then back into a tree trunk. And this in this series of like these events that I have to hit that are unavoidable and that are part of my life. But there's still free will and there's still free choices, because I can make there's tons of ways to get to these different events. There's certain events I'm going to hit, but there's a ton of different ways I can do it. And there's easier ways and there's harder ways. And so I remember seeing this, and they said, so you can either stay with us or you can go back. But if you do go back, it's your last chance. And the next thing I know, I don't remember choosing, but the next thing I know, I'm waking up to the paramedics. She's telling me that they're going to put a tourniquet on my arm. I end up with a 35/45 blood pressure, which is, I did a trauma course later that year, and we were talking about it, and it ends up being about less than 5% chance of survival with that little. The hospital for some reason didn't give me a transfusion, which I find really weird. All I got was an IV with saline solution, which is super weird. I end up having surgery. That went fine. But yeah, that this is your last chance really echoed throughout my mind. It still does every once in a while. Like when I first had it, it felt um, like felt almost like a guillotine hanging over you kind of thing. Like, okay, like I can't make a goddamn mistake. How I view it now is it kind of gave me the almost like a kick in the ass to make sure I made choices that I don't think I would have done otherwise without that threat. And so I think for myself, and I've done a couple interviews now about my NDEs in the last like month or two, and I think now it's mostly because it's what I need to hear at the time in order not to fall back into my old patterns. Mm-hmm.
That's a first for me to hearing that type of story. I suspect some of us might also be in that category where we have to choose like you did. But yeah, I suspect so that this was the last time you had to put yourself back together or like change your ways really to extend at least your life. Now, coming back to abductions, was that the only abduction that you had, the one that you had a kid, or did they ever come back to you later on and take you?
So the one I told you about in November, I think that was one where because I remember going up to the show. I assume I went into it. Um, and then probably in the year after in July, it's kind of hard to know. I we were sleeping in a at my parents' property, and we were in a trapper's tent, and we're sleeping in there. And I remember waking up and I couldn't move, and I got this all of a sudden intense, super intense pain in my head, like the highest high pitched sound you could think of. And it was felt like a needle was in my temple, and I couldn't move, and I tried to scream but nothing came out. And then I felt these long fingers on my shoulder and on my hip to roll me over, and then that's it. So the only like I don't remember a heck of a lot for any other abductions. um Everything started happening like after that. When I started exploring spirituality, it started turning from a like a nuts and bolts like aliens sort of thing into more spiritual things, which is I kind of or shamanistic things. So I kind of view I don't know what your view on this is, but I feel like they're one and the same. It's all part of the same spectrum. So, and I think it's how we interpret it. I don't know. It's really confusing. Well, like there was that one video with that shaman's like, oh, I know what those are. And he was from Peru, and he'd never seen an alien before, but they got shown that picture of a gray. He's like, oh yeah, these are such and such, or like they're these spirits kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of it's one of those questions that I'm constantly trying to think of is what exactly are we all experiencing? Are they ETs? Are they interdimensionals? Are they something spiritual? I'm leaning more right now. I'm leaning more towards the spiritual side, that it's been here for forever, and that we're in a kind of like Dolores Cannon says, we're in like a school. That's where I'm sitting like today, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the same for me at least. Really depends on in what environment you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I've like if one is very religious, like one of my friends, coworkers, she would when I talk about the shadow beings that happened to me, she said to me, "Are they sorcerers?"
Mm.
You can imagine that. That's a word that I'd never use to describe shadow.
Yeah.
So it really depends you're bringing up, let's say.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, I guess. Yeah. I've had a couple encounters with shadow beings. Like one in particular, I really remember is this is uh probably a month before the one in the tent. I woke up in the condo and there was this being 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, maybe, standing right beside the bed, and we only had about this much room between the bed and the wall. Um, and it was looking at me, and I woke up and I looked at it, and then I couldn't see anything, like no distinguishing features or anything. It just had like a large head, uh, but out like essentially an outline of a gray. And it noticed that I was looking at it, and then it just melted or disappeared into the wall. Like it was like it just walked right through it. Um, and that I remember thinking, holy shit, I don't know what this is. Um, yeah, I only have had the one shadow being as far as I can remember, yeah.
How about your children?
My children have had weird things. Um, they've all stopped for them as of right now. My one saw a bunch of children in her closet dressed up in uh like almost like Teletubby kind of like animal costumes, and it freaked her the like super freaked her out, and since then she's never dreamed again. Like she hasn't had a dream since that day. um and she had seen tons of UFOs. She saw way more UFOs than I did. It was like they were following her for a while there. She was the one that saw that first UFO for first. um then together we had seen a cigar shaped one. Again, she had always seen him first, but she stopped seeing everything. She doesn't really want to talk about it anymore. She's just recently gone to tarot, so we've been doing a little bit of tarot. Um, so I think that's like her avenue into this sort of stuff now, like getting in touch with her intuition. And then my other daughter, she had a lot of weird things, like way more. She would see this little guy. It was almost like that. The way she described it sounded like almost like a Michelin man. It was hard because she was so young. It was really hard for her to kind of describe it. She said it was like the size of a PC tower. But it was as tall as it was wide, and had like these rolls. So I kind of think like a Michelin man kind of thing. Um, and then it would always be there with something that was really tall, like a tall gray, like that was 7 feet tall. Our ceilings were only 8 feet in the condo, and they wouldn't say anything. She'd wake up and she'd see them. She was never afraid of them, which is interesting. Like she called them her friends, and they followed us after we moved and everything. But since turned 9, she hasn't had anything. She also had an experience where she went down the street to go see her friend. She came trucking back because she swore up and down something was following her, but there was nothing out there. Like the street was like that. And she was freaked right out. She was freaked out for a good couple hours until I calmed her down, saying it's okay, like don't worry about it. But yeah, yeah, it's kind of all kind of this kind of all kind of calmed down, other than synchronicities for me. That's pretty much everything's kind of like mellowed out. I must be in this one little low period, maybe. I know other people have said it too. Like they get these periods where we'll have like heightened activity and then some low things. I don't know if it has to do with your emotions either. I've noticed sometimes like heightened emotions, you have heightened experiences. And right now I'm kind of like in this kind of chill state, maybe. So maybe I'm not having as much. I don't know. I don't constantly thinking about this stuff. So
Yeah. Um, Coming back to the Teletubbies, could they have been like a screen image?
I assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assume so. I think so. Yeah, they were like in animal costumes. She said they just looked weird. It freaked her right out, and then yeah, she doesn't want to talk about any of that stuff anymore. So,
It's a bit like my dad when he woke up to having this weird clown in the bedroom. So,
hmm.
like the clown was like something was off. So the Greys were trying to portray themselves as clowns, but not being from like Earth. They got it
Yeah,
not totally like correct.
yeah. The interpretation's a little bit. It's like that uncanny valley thing. Yeah, we just know that there it's not quite what it ends up being more freaky than it should.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, having kids in your room all of a sudden in the middle of the night is probably not the the greatest thing. They never just come during the day, right?
yeah. Now, other than shadow beings, did you guys have like ghost activity in the house, poltergeist?
No, but the same guy I told you about that I worked with, he was living in the condo before we were in there. Because we had moved out um when when my oldest was fairly young, and he ended up moving in there for a couple of years, and he would not sleep in the main bedroom. He never told me why, but he said he had an experience that freaked him out so much that he would never sleep in the master bedroom anymore. He only slept in the spare. So maybe like in that condo we had I would see these, my daughter called them Venusians at the time. She's like, I don't know. She's like, I just think they're Venusians. She had no reason, but she just felt like that. I don't know. But they were like little cloud. They almost looked like a bunny, but they were like black little clouds that would you'd catch them just out of the corner of your eye. Yeah, it was a weird place. It was a there was a lot of weird energy there. It was kind of it was like a cave almost. It was nice when I finally finished it. It took me a couple years to finish it. But yeah, there was a weird energy. Um, I don't know. I don't know what that was.
Did you ever figure out why you and your family would have these experiences?
I still haven't. No idea. No idea. Yeah, during my NDE, never got any. I haven't got any answers.
Ever thought of doing like a background check, your family bloodline, try to trace it back, maybe figure things out?
No, never thought about that. My mom's done our genealogies and stuff. Like on my mom's side, we're related to Bonnie Prince Charlie. I don't know if that matters, but uh, I don't know. I have no idea. I've never. We were talking before, like, I've never had any encounters with like government officials, really, like any weird things like that. I'm sure. Knock on wood. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why why our particular bloodline. We do have particular weird medical things. So like I have hyperanaphylaxis, which is I can't take an EpiPen. So I'm allergic to peanuts, and I can't take adrenaline or EpiPen to counteract it. I just have to take Benadryl and the other drugs that they give because my body compensates so high that the other stuff when it happened the one time, the paramedic gave me what you normally give and ended up giving me a heart attack. And this was when I was quite a bit younger. So yeah, I have hyperanaphylaxis. My daughter does. My mom does. My mom also had, and I also have. My mom's celiac. Same with my grandma. I'm also borderline celiac, so I have to. I can splurge every once in a while, like on a donut, but most of the time I have to be careful. So there's these autoimmune diseases uh, that might have something to do with it. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It's an
Um,
interesting thought, though.
yeah. Now, having been abducted, do you know if you might have had like an implant put in you?
Uh, Not that I know of, but I had lots of nosebleeds as a kid, tons, and they would just be random. Um, they would just be like, I'd wake up and there'd be blood everywhere. I haven't had them for years. Um, my daughter just told me about, she just had one at school where she was writing on the board and she just started, blood started pouring out of her nose, and everybody's like, "You have a nosebleed." And like I've had that. I don't know if I had implants. My grandpa sure thought he did. He thought he had one right up in his nose. Um, I if I did, I don't know.
Fascinating. Could be, could be.
Hmm.
Um, so let's finish off the interview. Now, do you have like a closing statement, perhaps, or maybe like a last story that you might want to get out?
I think that's pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, as far as like a closing statement, if anybody wants to check out like my some of the stories I've already talked about, but more in depth with I've been using Midjourney to kind of like illustrate my journey. That's on my YouTube channel. It's Our Collective Experiences. I'm also going to be doing one on what I'm going to be calling it's like the Survivor's Guide to the Flip, essentially. So it's going to be all the different things that I've explored since my near-death experience, like almost like as a resource for anybody that's like looking to get into like learn about all this different stuff. Because I've been like with my ADHD, I've just been like just like learning about tons on shamanism, hermeticism, like all those different isms, like omonism. Lots to do with Carl Jung. So I'm gonna make this video about that, and then I'm always looking to chat with people, so they can contact me through my channel there. And I'm starting to do group meditations, which is fun, which I never thought. Again, there's all this. It's weird how your life kind of turns out. Like you never think you're gonna be doing things, and all of a sudden you're doing these really weird things. Yeah,
things change. Well, Sean, thanks for coming on. It's been fun
Thank
having
you.
you on, and to have another Canadian on board, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So to those watching, I hope you enjoyed today's interview. I had fun. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Gray, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.